Hey guys, and welcome to a new episode of Digital Classroom. Today we are going to talk about something that's very close to everybody's heart, workflow. Because workflow makes it easier to work. It makes the workflow. So we all know workflow, right? It's the way that you work. It's actually the order in which you work. Now, a very simple example of a workflow is first planning, then of course doing the shoot, then selecting the images, and then retouching, storing the images and sending it to a client. That can be a workflow. But what we're talking about today is actually a different workflow. It's working in your retouching workflow. So how do we streamline everything? Because when I look at my own retouching, I will select my images. Then I will look for a certain look in my images, so I'm doing a little bit of tinting. Of course, we have to do some skin retouching. We have to make sure that stuff in the back is gone. We do some adjustments in contrast. We want some extra, we want a lot, right? So often that means that in Lightroom, we have a lot of options, but sometimes we also need some plugins. So if we go to Photoshop, we have a lot of options, but we also need a lot of plugins. And normally that's not really a problem. If you only have to retouch one or two images, you can go by like, okay, let's go through the whole workflow and just store those images. But sometimes, especially for example, when you're traveling or you have to do a lot of images, wouldn't it be cool if you don't have to go into Photoshop, open up your plugin for your skin, then open up the plugin for your tinting, then open up the plugin for your local contrast, then etc, etc. And this is where Luminar is really awesome. So today we're going to take a look at Luminar AI, Artificial Intelligence. Now I have to be very honest with you guys. There are two versions of Luminar at the moment that I'm using. I'm using Neo and I'm using Luminar AI. Now Luminar AI for me is the more advanced, the more complete version of Luminar. Luminar Neo, however, is very, very promising. Think about stuff like magically disappearing power lines, magically disappearing that freaking dust on your sensors. It's all in Neo. But Luminar AI, well, let's just take a look at it. And let's start with a very simple portrait from a model. And let's see if with one program we can literally do our complete workflow. Okay guys, let's take a look at this portrait from Rebecca. Now, I want to show you just how I create presets and of course how I do the whole workflow. But we're not going to make it a really long video. I don't think that's necessary. Just go through it. Okay, so in Luminar AI, I will actually go to Edit. And of course I will just follow the workflow. And this is the one thing that I really like about Luminar. You don't have to jump inside other software. It's all there. So let's start with, for example, the accent. Now in this case, I just want to open up the background just a little bit. We don't need anything with erase at the moment. That's nice if you want to do some more retouching on the skin or if you want to remove something. Maybe we're going to do that later, but maybe it's not necessary. But it could be that the rings under our eyes, that we need to do that with the eraser tool. Okay, for light, it's very simple. You have exposure, smart contrast, highlights and shadows. In this case, I'm using a light meter, so I don't need to adjust a lot. But I always like the smart contrast. Look at this. It's a totally different contrast than that you see in other software. I really like that. You can protect your highlights or you can give a little bit more in shadows. In this case, I don't really need it, so let's leave it that way. Of course, you still have curves, and in curves you can of course do already some color tweaking. So let's say a little bit less red in the shadows and in the highlights just a little bit more. But we're not going to do that now. I'm just going to reset this, because we're going to do that later on. And this is what I really like about Luminar. Okay, let's go for structure. Let's zoom in for now. And I want to make sure that it doesn't end up on the skin, because that's ugly. So let's boost it. And as you can see, the skin is relatively clear from this effect. So let's zoom out and see what it does. Yeah, I really like that. It just gives a little bit more pop to the image. Okay, now when we go to color, you have saturation and vibrance. I will mostly just give a little bit of vibrance, just to make those images jump out a little bit more. Now in this case, of course, he has beautiful green hair. So you could go for a little bit more green maybe. Just find where it is. And maybe add some cyan too. As you can see, this is the hue I'm using at the moment. And that's because I want to make sure that the green and the cyan is really into that darker area. Just look at her top of her head and you can see that we're now changing that green. And I want to make sure that we have a lot of green there. There we go. And the reason I'm also picking cyan is because they're really close together. So sometimes you need to do that. Now by using the hue, I'm actually just fine tweaking and the whole area there. Okay. And then of course we go to saturation to give it a little bit more boost. And just make sure that you don't touch any skin tones. Now if you need to take it out somewhere, you can always go here into your masking and you can literally just take the effect out. But up until now we're doing pretty well. Same with cyan here. And as you can see here, the top of the hair just gives a little bit of a cyan twist. So I really like that. The blues of course are in her shirt. So let's pump that up just a little bit. There we go. That looks really nice. And of course we can also go into details and for example give a little bit more detail in the smaller details. And that becomes really ugly very, very fast. Or we can go into medium details, which are a little bit more forgivable in a model shot. And of course the large details. Now in this case I don't think we need to do a lot with details, but just give it a little bit of an extra boost. Yeah, that's hardly anything, so just leave that at 0. I don't want to go harder, because then the face becomes a little bit more grungy. And that's something I really don't want in this shot. Okay, let's go for the vignette. So I always like my images to be a little bit darker on the sides. You might say that's a problem with a lens, so we don't want this. But I think that a vignette can really enhance the shot and just pull the viewer in. And of course you can do select subject. And this is really cool because, for example, you want the vignette there. Or for this case, of course, we want it there. I like it a little bit lower. Great. Okay, now we're going into the more creative stuff. And this is cool. You can use atmosphere, for example, to add fog to landscapes. And sometimes in model shots you can also add a little bit of a fake mist. But as you can see here, it doesn't really work for images like this. It just gives the background exactly the opposite of what I already did. This is why I show it. Sometimes you want the background to be less sharp. So in this case I made it sharper. Sometimes you want it less sharp. And then this part comes in very, very handy. Although it's meant for landscapes, as you can see here, it leaves the model almost untouched. And it just creates something on the backdrop. So really nice to have it. Hardly use it, but if you need it, it's there. Dramatic will give you a really nice look for example, a little bit more grungy looks, like say in an urban location. So let's just show you what it does. As you can see here, for me in this shot it doesn't really work because I want to have those colors in. I want those colors to pop. So we're gonna go down to mood, and this is where the fun part comes in. Now I love to tint my images. Somehow when I scan film, I'm always very happy with the results. And when I shoot digital, they always come out of the camera and I go like, yeah, it looks great. But it's not something where I go, wow, that's awesome. And this is where mood comes in. You can go through your several LUTs and you can just show the difference on the screen. There we go. And at that point, I will literally just look at the images, go through them, and I will find what I really like for this shot. So let's go through. Now, in all honesty, I already saw a few that I really liked, but I just want to show you guys how subtle and sometimes how extreme they are. And you can also load you can also load different LUTs by load custom LUT. The only thing that I don't like at the moment is you don't have an option to store those LUTs. Of course you can put them in your hard drive in the folder where these are, but then every time you update Luminar, they will take those out again. So you can just make a folder on your computer and copy it in again. It's not a big deal, but I would love them to incorporate it that you can save your own personal LUTs. I think I'm going to go for this one. And you can also change the strength. In this case, I just want it a little bit in. I'm not for over the top. I'm always for very subtle. But trust me, when I'm done, you can see a huge difference. And I think I really like the idea that it's just tinting. It's almost like using film. Because if you see the original, there's a huge difference. But it doesn't really look like we've changed a lot to the image. It's just more pop, more color. It's really nice. For toning, we also have a lot of options. For example, we can go into highlights and give it more saturation. But you can also change the hue of those highlights. So you can really fine tune, for example, your skin tones. If you want it a little bit less, you can really fine tune it really nice with this. So on, off. Again, it's very subtle, but I like that subtlety. Same for the shadows. Let's pump it up first. But I think for the shadows, we want a little bit more of that blue to be enhanced. There we go. Go back to the shadows. Sorry, to the highlights, of course. And then take it maybe a little bit more towards the reds. There we go. Okay, look at the difference. Really nice. Again, very subtle. Now, matte, you won't see me using a lot. I don't really like the matte look like this. It's not my thing. So I will not do that. Now, mystical, this is really nice for example, if you want a little bit of a glow in your image. So I'll show you what it does. So if you open this up, you can literally see that it changes the skin, not a lot, but it does give you a little bit more detail a little bit more contrast. Of course, you can bump up your shadows then again to take out the effect there and add some smoothness. But overall, I think the mystical effect is really great. And it just gives the image a little bit more of a glow, as you can see here. It just evens everything out very, very nicely. We also have glow, and this is the part where I go like, I don't know, I like the mystical effect, but the glow for me, it's sometimes just a little bit too much. But just a hinge of soft focus, especially on faces, can be really, really nice. And of course then a little bit of softness. You can add a little bit of brightness. And because I'm doing so little, you can hardly see the effect. So let's overdo it. So you can see the brightness of that glow. Now in my case, again, I like it really, really subtle. So let's just open it up just a little bit. And I really like that for the skin. Now you can choose different options, of course. Soft focus, glow, Orton effect. Glow is a little bit less extreme, but I think overall I just like the soft focus more. I think this is also one of the reasons I love that K&F black mist filter. It just doesn't really take out the sharpness, for example, in the eyes, but it does give you a beautiful, nice, soft quality of light, which somehow I really, really like. Glow. And let's turn it on again. There we go. Okay, film grain. Now in this case I'm not going to add any grain, but you have a lot of options there. Let's just overdo it for now. As you can see here, it adds a lot of grain, and you can even change the size of the grain. Very important. And the roughness, also very important if you love adding grain to your images. I sometimes do it when the skin is really, really bad and you have to do a lot of retouching. I will just add a little bit of grain, as you can see here. And it just opens up the skin nicely, and it takes out that really weird artificial glow. Okay, let's go for portrait. Now, portrait bouquet is something I will not use. Oh, by the way, I see it's a little bit too light now, probably thanks to the glow. So let's just make sure that we take that down just a little bit. So we don't want to make the image pop too much. There we go. And just protect the highlights. Cool. Add a little bit of shadow in the face. Okay, I think this looks... Yeah, that looks okay. Of course, we have way too much color now, so I will go back into color and just tone that down a little bit. Sometimes you have to go back in your workflow to correct some stuff. That's no problem at all. That's the nice thing about using a raw converter. And this is also why I love Luminar AI more than, for example, all the plugins in Photoshop. In Photoshop, if you use your plugins, it can be awesome. But if you make a mistake in one of the plugins, it's very difficult to go all the way back to that first plugin. Here, it's very simple. If you make a mistake in a previous plugin and you're here, you simply just scroll back to the top and you change some stuff and, well, you're done. So that's a really big advantage. Okay, so let's just take that saturation down even more. There we go. Now, if you go like, oh, Frank, I really like that saturation, just not in the reds. No problem. Let's bump that up again. And let's only take out the reds. And then we go to saturation, reds, and just take it out of the face. There you go. Orange also a little bit in the face. And yellow is also a color that sometimes has a little bit of influence there. There we go. Okay, let's go without. Yeah, that looks better. I hope on YouTube you also see the slight subtle differences, but in the end everything adds up, trust me. Okay, so let's start with the face. Now, of course, you can use face lighting. Let's zoom out just a little bit. So, you can use face light, which is really nice, but in this case we are already on the top. I think it's already a little bit too hot there, so let's not do that. You can slim the face, something I would really not do, but sometimes, well, for some photographers it can be handy. if you really want to change something to your model. But in my case, I actually like the models how they are, so I want to do that. But I do want to show it to you guys. Now this is something that is cool. The eyes, and the selection is actually pretty amazing, to be honest. So let's change the eye colors to blue. And of course we have to make sure that the iris visibility is there. Do you see that? Now the eyes are blue. It's amazing what they do. Really nice. You can change the visibility a little bit lower. Or maybe you want her to have green eyes. Oh yeah, that looks freaky. But let's keep it for the original, otherwise my model won't be happy, I think. So let's add a little bit of iris flare on the bottom. Let's enlarge the eyes a little bit. Now again, it's not something I would do. I just want to show you guys that it's possible. Now the thing that I do like about Luminar, it's subtle. If you see the difference, it's not like totally over the top, make it a cartoon character. It's literally okay. Let's do the eye whitening a little bit, and don't overdo it, because then you get those Walking Dead eyes, which you don't want, of course, but a little bit is okay. You have the eye enhancer, just give it a little bit more sharpness in the iris, as you can see here. Also very cool. Red eye removal, we don't need that. The dark circles, hey, those were underneath her eyes, as you can see here. Very nice. And improve eyebrows. Now Rebecca doesn't really need to enhance the eyebrows, but as you can see here, also very nice. Then of course we have the mouth, and we can also change a lot of there. Let's change the lip saturation, for example. Give it a little bit more red. You can change the color red a little bit. There we go. And of course you have teeth whitening, but she has her mouth closed, so at this moment we don't see that. Okay, the next one. This is the one that it's really done it for me. Now, I shoot a lot of model photography, and most of the time the models do their own makeup, and sometimes we also have a makeup artist, of course, but for workshops that just takes too much time. So they do their own makeup, and that also means that we sometimes have to work with skin that's not really 100% perfect. Now I think that Rebecca has a really nice skin, but it still needs a little bit of softening. So let's see what I can do. Let's turn the amount all the way up, because I know on YouTube a lot of detail is lost. And let's also do some shine removal, like on the top of her head. It's still a little bit too much. And there we go. And you can even choose for the option skin defects removal. I always plug that on, but sometimes you have to turn it on and off to see what it does. And in this case, it doesn't do a very well job, as you can see here. So in this case, I'm not going to use it. Okay, then we have our body shape. I'm just going to show you guys. This is also something that I would never use on a model, because it really changes who the model is, and because it's a portrait it doesn't work here, but trust me, it's not something that I would use. It actually changes the shape of the body to make it more slim or more wide. And we have our high key. Now in this case we're not shooting on high key, but we can still show it, as you can see here. It's a really nice thing if you have a white backdrop and it's not 100% white. You can still add a little bit of here, so that's cool. Okay, super contrast. What I will normally do is I will go to my highlight contrast, put it about 50%, and then just play with the effect and see what I like. So in this case I want to protect the highlights just a little bit. There we go. And now the shine on that face is already gone. As you can see here, this is a little bit too much. This is way better. Go for the mid-tones contrast and just open it up just a little bit, and don't overdo it. There we go. And the same for the shadow contrast. Now in this case we want to open up the shadows just a little bit. There we go. Okay, check before and after. Oh, we're going all right. We have color harmony. Now this is something that I love for landscapes, and with model photography I use it sometimes to just open up some colors or just play around with some more extreme looks and add a little bit of cool in the shot. There we go. We still have options like color contrast. In this case, I think this image won't benefit from it. We have split color warmth, so you can split between warm and cool. So you can change your warm colors, and of course you can change your cool colors. Really nice. And for me, this is all fine-tuning, and I really like that that software packages nowadays have so much more attention for color toning. It's just insane that they didn't in the past. So let's do some little cyan and a red in the shadows. There we go. And you can change the color balance also for the magenta and greens. Make sure if you do something like this that you have a well calibrated monitor. Don't try to do this on a monitor that's not calibrated. Then just leave it in the middle. Because if you make a mistake with this, it will show up on monitors like crazy if they are well calibrated. Or even if they're not calibrated, because the user is used to that image quality. Okay. Yeah, I really like that. Okay. If we still have dodge and burn, of course, and clone. Now, for the clone tool, this is where we're actually going to take care of those little nasty pieces around her eyes. So let's go for 100%. And let's just click to set the source here. And there you go. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Okay. And let's do that also on the other side. Let's do clone. Okay. Let's make it a little bit smaller, by the way. There we go. Okay. Let's click for there. And let's just go over those parts of the eyes that we don't like. There we go. Awesome. And there we go. So let's take a look at before and then after. It does have to do all the calculations now. Before, after. Really nice. And what I normally do is after this I will just take a step back, look at the image and go like, okay, it looks great, but it needs to be a little bit darker. So then I will go back to the top again and I will just lower the exposure. And of course, when you lower the exposure, also your colors become a little bit more, well, saturated. So always go back to color and also change there your saturation again a little bit if you want that same look. And this is actually my whole workflow in Luminar. Now over here you can still do local masking, of course, and add masks. You can add texture to your images in certain places, or you can do a basic adjustments. Let's, for example, do basic. And let's just give a little bit more saturation in our hair. There you go. And just add some saturation there. Make it pop. There we go. That's of course way too much. Turn it down. This is because I'm screen recording. It's now very, very slow. But overall, if I'm not screen recording, this is almost instant. So it works really fast. Add maybe a little bit of structure to the hair. That's something that I really like, to make those hairs really pop. Okay. Now you might wonder, like, okay, Frank, so what is that structure that you can add? Well, let me show you. So let's first turn that off, turn that on again. Let's go for add. And in this case, we're going to do structure. Now, structure is something you probably know from, for example, the overlays in Photoshop. Well, this is something similar. So let's say we want a little bit of light leakage in here. So let's go for this one. And it will literally just project it over your original image. Now, of course, this looks very, very bad. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that it doesn't blend like screen, but for example, like soft light, or maybe hard light, or difference, or subtract. You can do whatever you want. In this case, let's find something that I like. I think lighten works really well in this case. You can still change the brightness of that overlay. You can, of course, add some contrast to it. And the saturation. And, of course, you can change the hue. In this case, I like that red in there. But I think this is way too much. So just go down and just very slightly build it up. Okay, now that I got what I like, I can still change, for example, the position. I can flip it over to the top. Or I can just go like, yeah, you know, I like it, but let's try something else. Let's be creative. Nah, that's too fake. Ooh, this is really cool. Let's try this one. Nah. This one is also really nice. But I think in the end, I'm actually really liking this one. I don't know why, but it just looks very, very cool. Okay, but in this case, maybe the opacity all the way down and just a little bit in. There we go. Almost like it's not there. subtle stuff, you know. Very cool. Maybe switch it over or flip it. I think this is cool. But then, yeah, on the top, that's, for me, that's the best. Okay. And now go back here and add some vignetting. There we go. And of course, the size of the vignette needs to be smaller for me. And we need a lot of roundness in that vignette. I love to feather it. And inner light, you can always give a little bit, but in this case, we don't need that. So this looks really nice. If you want to choose your subject, again, I showed that before, you can do it here or here. In this case, I want it on the mouth. I like the top a little bit darker. I really think this works fine. Okay, so let's say that you really like what you see. You can now go here into those three dots and you can actually save this as your preset. And this is really nice, but as you can see now, it disappeared. Where is it? Well, go into your templates, and when you're in your templates, go to My Templates, and at that point, you see that the template is over here, and it has a name, mytemplate.edit. Just go for the three dots, and just go for rename. Now in this case, let's just call this FD Luminar. And there you go. So now I have that preset, and now I can always go back to that preset. For example, if I like this one better, and I go like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, in this case, that's not really working, and that's also true because it's a preset I created for the gels. Let's say we take something that's a little bit less extreme. Like for example, this or bleaker. And you can get those presets, by the way. We created a whole preset pack with over 70 presets for you guys. So you can get them on our site. I will leave the link in the description below. And just choose one of the presets that you like. But let's say that in the end you go like, yeah, not really. Now you can always go back to your FD Luminar. Now let's say that you like the preset, but you still want to edit something in that preset. Of course, if it's only for one shot, you can go into Edit and do it for that one shot. But you can also go to Templates and actually use the three dots and edit your template. Because there's one thing that I didn't take into account when I'm storing that preset, and that's actually I did some local masking. And as you can see here, when you store the preset, it will also store that basic masking. So that means that every time I open up a shot, it will actually make the top of the hair a little bit more saturated. But what if there's no hair? You get the feeling, right? So when you store it as a preset, make absolutely sure that you don't use any local masking. Okay, also go for the history, and now you can actually see everything that you did. And for example, go back to certain stages in your edit. For example, well, maybe we have to go here. Or we want to go here or here. You can literally see everything that you've done. Now in the end, we're just going to go, of course, for the final shot. Now, Luminar for me has a lot of things that I really like. There's also a lot of things that are a little bit more limited. But you have to realize this is a complete workflow package. You don't need any other plugins. You literally go from an okay shot to a final result. Now, of course, when you use plugins and you use it in Photoshop, you may do it a little bit better. But let's be honest, why spend 2 hours on an image when you can do it in one? And why spend 1 hour on an image with 3 or 4 plugins if you can do it in one simple session? And even better, if I open up my next shot, I can literally just use my template. And the template already has the skin retouching in it. And there is one thing that I didn't show you guys yet. And I think that's the most surprising, at least for me that was the most surprising. So let's go for Edit. And as you can see here, I did that skin retouching. Now normally when you do skin retouching, you always have to make sure that it's not in the hairs, that it's not in the backdrop or any other location where you can actually see the same skin tones. Somehow Luminar does this really well, because if I turn it off and it's on full blast, I don't see anywhere where there's more sharpness. It's actually pretty much okay with the selection. Now, if you are still in doubt and you go like, I don't know, Frank, I want to make sure that it's only the skin that is touched by that preset, no problem. Go here into masking and just paint in your mask. And at that point, you will find out that it's only in the areas where you masked it and not in the other area. So it's just up to you, just what you want. But my experience with most of the other software is always mask, with Luminar, it's the first time I'm actually working with software where I don't need to mask. That's a little bit getting used to be honest. Okay, let's go back for the conclusion to the studio. Now, as you see, that was really easy. Everything is in one package. And although, of course, when you use a separate plugin, it can be better. But sometimes you don't need better. You need something that's really good. You don't need something that's okay, but you need something that's really good. And most of the times you don't want to figure around with a pencil. You just want a one-click solution. And this is, as I already mentioned in the retouching part, this is where that skin retouching is so important. You can do the masking in Luminar or in Photoshop or wherever you want to do it, but you don't have to because the selection is really good. So that means that overall you can just create presets, just click on it and the whole image is done, including the skin. And of course you can always refine it with masking. So this is what I wanted to show you today about Luminar AI. And well, I hope you enjoyed it, and you will find links in the description to get Luminar AI yourself or Neo. They're both really, really nice. See you again next time. And of course, if you like this video, tell other people about it so our channel can grow. Hit that like and bell notification. And well, see you again next time. Bye guys.